For 20 years, Zhou Yanji and I lived in a marriage of misery. The last time we fought, he grabbed me by the throat, demanding to know why Zhang Lingyi had been sent for the marriage alliance, why it wasn't me who had died. I laughed and said it was because he was incompetent, that he couldn't protect Zhang Lingyi. After years of marriage, we knew each other best, striking precisely where it hurt the most. But on the day of the rebellion, Zhou Yanji protected me with all his might. He took several arrows to the chest and died in my arms. As he lay dying, he wiped away my tears, a look of release on his face. Don't cry. All these years, I've been truly tired. If there is a next life, let's release each other. I want to find her. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day Nanzhou requested a marriage alliance. I no longer forced the issue. I volunteered to be the one sent for the marriage. This time, I decided to grant Zhou Yanji his wish. Huiyan, have you chosen a husband? Are you still insistent on marrying Zhou Yanji? My father, Emperor's voice echoed in the hall. A sharp pain in my knees pulled me back to reality. I lowered my head. I, your daughter, volunteer for the marriage alliance with Nanzhou. Nanzhou's official request was for a princess. And of the right age, there was only myself and Zhang Lingyi. My father, Emperor, had intended for me to choose a husband in the capital. But at that time, I only had eyes for Zhou Yanji. Accepting the heavy imperial edict with both hands, I kowtowed deeply once more, then turned and walked out of the throne hall. Outside, a fine rain was falling like a woven tapestry. Zhou Yanji's figure was still waiting at the bottom of the steps, his clothes soaked through. Seeing him so damp, I subconsciously raised a hand to brush the moisture away, but he sidestepped, his gaze falling on the bright yellow scroll in my hands. His face changed drastically. He abruptly lifted the hem of his robe and knelt in the rain, his voice urgent. Your Highness, please ask His Majesty to retract the order. The seventh princess has a willful temperament. She is by no means a suitable choice for the marriage alliance. Gazing at that familiar, handsome profile, a sourness surged in my throat. I forced it down. Zhou Yanji, you would kneel to me for her. He bowed lower, his forehead touching the cold stone steps. I wouldn't dare. It's just that the seventh princess has been frail since childhood. If she were to marry so far away in Nanzhou, if she goes, she will die. I suddenly let out a soft horse laugh. So, you think I am suitable? Zhou Yanji looked up sharply. I have no such intention. I only wish to find a solution that harms neither. I am willing to lead an army to repel Nanzhou. I knew what he was thinking. In his eyes, because my mother died in childbirth with her, I hated Zhang Lingyi to the bone. At this moment, I would surely kick her while she was down. The dark circles under his eyes were stark. He had clearly lost sleep for nights over this marriage alliance. In the past, I would have seized the chance to throw myself into his arms and make him promise to stay with me. But now, I only felt weary in body and soul. I withdrew my gaze, my tone indifferent. I promise you, Zhang Lingyi will not be sent for the marriage. Zhou Yanji let out a breath of relief. As he stood, he finally noticed the haggard look on my face. He subconsciously took out a handkerchief to wipe my face, but I avoided his touch. His hand froze in midair. I smiled and handed him the edict. Just as he was about to unroll it, I pressed his hand down. Wait half a month before you look. I looked at him deeply for a moment, straightened my back, and turned to leave. Your Highness, he grabbed my wrist, his voice urgent like a promise. You need not worry. I will take you as my wife. A tear slid silently from the corner of my eye. Marry him? What was the point? The one he loved was, after all, not me. Over the years, I had watched him transform from a high-spirited youth into a grim, calculating court official. He could orchestrate deadly plots with a smile. Yet, after Zhang Lingyi's death, he never smiled again. It was only after dying once that I finally understood. Some love is doomed from the start. This time, it was my turn to grant him his wish. I walked for a long time, finally reaching the top of the bell tower my father emperor had built for my mother. My mother had loved my father emperor to the point of heartbreak. She died in childbirth, but it wasn't just childbirth. My father emperor loved her, but after she was gone, the harem was never empty. And me, I had bound Zhou Yanji with so-called love for 20 years, only for it to end in mutual destruction. The wind tugged wildly at my skirts. I sat alone until dusk settled. Footsteps sounded behind me. When Zhou Yanji saw me sitting on the dangerous edge, his face went deathly pale. "Your Highness, what are you doing?" I met his gaze and smiled faintly. "Nothing, just enjoying the view. From here, one could overlook the entire imperial city. For me, such opportunities were numbered." Zhou Yanji sighed in relief, striding over in a few steps and gripping my wrist tightly. "Don't make me worry. Don't come here alone again." His tone was laced with concern. I remained silent. He was always like this. Even without love, he was good to me out of habit and responsibility. But what I craved was affection from the bottom of his heart. If he had only looked at me more closely at that moment, he would have noticed the hairpin in my hair was the one from Nanja's marriage proposal. But he didn't. Zhou Yanji held out a wooden box to me. "Your birthday gift." I looked at him. "My birthday is still some time away." I was afraid I'd forget with all the matters to attend to. He explained. "I prepared it for you in advance, lest you get angry with me again." Hearing his words, I didn't reply. He seemed to sense my strangeness, his voice dropping lower. "Huiyan, we are to be married. Since I have agreed to your wish and will marry you, I cannot disregard the seventh princess's safety." Before he could finish, my heart sank. You should know how tragic the fate of the last princess sent for a marriage alliance was. I cannot let her follow in those footsteps. Every word he spoke was filled with sincere emotion. I suddenly felt a flicker of anticipation. What would his expression be if he knew the one marrying into Nanja was me? Zhou Yanji was still persuading me gently. "The seventh princess is your only sister. In the future, you should yield to her more in all things." I clenched my fists inside my sleeves, a sharp pain piercing my heart. Taking a deep breath, I replied, "Fine. I will yield everything to her, including you. I will yield you to her as well." The next morning, Zhou Yanji said he wanted to take me out to relax. I was in no mood and refused him directly. He didn't say much, but at noon, he sent someone with my favorite flower lanterns. This was an unspoken agreement between us. Whenever I was melancholic, he would gift me lanterns and invite me for a boat ride on the lake. Looking at the lanterns, I eventually went to meet him. But halfway there, I overheard passing eunuchs and palace maids whispering, "Did you hear? The seventh princess merely stumbled, and Lord Zhou acted like he'd gone mad with worry." I know, right? It looks like good news is on the horizon for them. They've gone boating on the lake together. Their discussion left me in a daze. During the most difficult days after my mother's passing, it was Zhou Yanji who stayed by my side. Knowing then that my mother had died of depression after falling for my father's favor, I stubbornly demanded that Zhou Yanji prove I was his one and only. He once solemnly promised that he would only ever go boating on the lake with me. When I reached the lakeside, the scene before me stung my eyes. Zhang Lingyi was sitting right next to Zhou Yanji, her posture intimate. When Zhou Yanji looked up and saw me, a clear panic flashed across his face. But Zhang Lingyi spoke with a sweet smile. "Sister, you're here. Father Emperor told me to prepare for my wedding. It seems I'm the one being sent for the marriage after all. Sister, is your wish fulfilled?" Zhou Yanji's gaze instantly turned cold as he questioned me harshly. "You clearly promised not to make things difficult for Lingyi regarding the marriage." I said, "I would marry you. What more are you not satisfied with?" Zhang Lingyi's eyes re-eamed as well, and she stepped forward. "Sister, I am willing to take on the responsibility of the marriage alliance. It's just I truly can't bear to part with Lord Zhou. So, I came to say goodbye. Please don't be angry, sister. Please give me some time to compose myself." "All right." As she spoke, tears streamed down her face. Zhou Yanji's voice was filled with disappointment. "Zhang Huyan, must you force Lingyi to her death to be satisfied? When did you become so cold-blooded and heartless?" I looked at him, and he seemed like a stranger. "And you? Are you still the Zhou Yanji I once knew? He scoffed, his exhaustion apparent. Enough. You always have your reasons. Since you won't find a way for Lingyi, I will. I will stop her marriage alliance. Hearing this, Zhang Lingyi's face turned pale, and tears flowed like a spring. My lord, you mustn't. To do so is to defy an imperial edict. She fainted dramatically into Zhou Yanji's arms. A flicker of cold mockery crossed my eyes. Seeing my indifference, Zhou Yanji violently grabbed my wrist. Your sister has fainted from fear, and you're still in the mood for a boat ride. If anything happens to her, I see no need for our engagement to stand. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, my gaze was as cold as ice. Let go, my voice was calm and steady. Veins bulged on his forehead. Zhang Huyan, do you just want to watch her die? I promised your mother I would protect you, but that doesn't mean I can indulge you in hurting Lingyi time and again. He grew more agitated, as if we had returned to one of our countless fierce arguments from our past life. My tone was flat. I've grown up. I don't need your protection anymore. Go protect her. As if remembering something, Zhou Yanji lowered his head and spoke in a deep voice.
I'm sorry.
His Majesty considers you in all things, but the seventh princess. She has only me to rely on in this world. I try to calm myself and turn to return to my palace. Just then, a slowly reviving Zhang Lingyi followed me into my carriage. Not long after the carriage started moving, disaster struck. Several arrows shot through the air. My heart sank. This is bad. Someone wants to sabotage the marriage alliance by assassinating the princess. The guards drew their swords to fight, but they were cut down one by the assassins. Zhang Lingyi was terrified, her face ashen. Zhou Yanji reacted instantly, leaping onto the carriage. Seeing him, Zhang Lingyi threw herself into his arms, clinging to him tightly. Zhou Yanji subconsciously shielded her in his embrace, then said to me urgently, Your Highness's guards are skilled. I'll get the seventh princess to safety first and come right back for you. Before his words had faded, he had already jumped from the carriage, holding Zhang Lingyi. In that instant, a cold arrow whistling with force pierced through my chest. Excruciating pain swept through my body, so intense that tears streamed uncontrollably from my eyes. The last thing I saw before my vision went completely dark was Zhou Yanji holding Zhang Lingyi, disappearing into the chaotic dust without a single look back. I struggled to lift my heavy eyelids. My blurry vision gradually focused, and I recognized my familiar palace chambers. The imperial physician said the arrow had fortunately missed any vital spots. Zhou Yanji kept watch by my bed, the dark circles under his eyes deep and heavy to find the herbs for my wound as quickly as possible. He had ridden day and night, exhausting 2 fast horses to death. Now, he carefully brought a bowl of medicine to my lips. The liquid slid down my throat, but could not warm my silent heart. A palace attendant reported in a low voice from outside. Lord Zhou, His Majesty requests your presence. Zhou Yanji carefully tucked the corner of my blanket in. Rest well. I'll be right back, he said gently. I opened my mouth, but in the end, I just lowered my eyes, swallowing all my words. When he returned, his steps were staggering and unsteady, and he brought a lingering chill with him. As expected, he had been punished by my father emperor. Summoned the imperial physician. My voice was, but he cut me off sharply, his eyes red-rimmed. Your Highness, His Majesty, because the seventh princess left the palace without permission, he has placed all the blame for your assassination attempt on her. He threatens to punish her severely. I managed a slight smile. You want me to plead for her? You know Father Emperor's temper, don't you? When has he ever allowed anyone to question his decisions? Zhou Yanji froze for a moment, then actually knelt down. If you would only speak even just a single light word, His Majesty will surely soften. The seventh princess. She was just being a little playful. She has no ill intentions. She never meant to involve your Highness in this. He was kneeling to me for Zhang Lingyi again. He knew perfectly well that I hated it when he bowed to me. My gaze swept over the thin, long scar near the corner of his right eye. That was from when I was 15. I had playfully climbed a tall tree and fallen. He had thrown himself forward to save me, and a sharp stone had left that mark. He had once risked his life for me. But what if it had been Zhang Lingyi who fell from the tree that day? What if she had been the one in danger? The answer was obvious. A thick wave of bitterness rose in my nose, blurring my vision slightly. I looked at him, my voice as light as a breeze that could scatter at any moment. Zhou Yanji, thank you for saving my life back then without any regard for your own. Ever since Mother passed away, it's been a very, very long time since I've felt the warmth of being protected by someone with all their strength. I know all these years, my persistence, my demands, they must have made you very tired, very troubled, right? My gaze fell on his still re-ened eyes and tightly pressed lips. The truth is, I'm tired, too. I don't want to fight anymore. Never again. I would soon be leaving this place forever. Zhou Yanji's lips moved as if he wanted to say more. Suddenly, a guard hurried in from outside and whispered urgently in his ear. The words seventh princess drifted clearly to my ears. Zhang Lingyi must have heard he was punished and was anxiously looking for him. A flash of apology crossed Zhou Yanji's eyes. He spoke quickly. Your Highness, I have an urgent matter to attend to. I will come see you again later. He didn't even wait for my response before rising abruptly. Though his steps were unsteady, he strode briskly out of the hall without a backward glance. He was heading in the direction of Zhang Lingyi's palace. After I could walk again, the first thing I did was take every gift Zhou Yanji had given me over the years, leaving none behind, and throw them all into the blazing brazier. The flames licked greedily at them, the fiery light dancing and burning in my eyes. I stood quietly watching the things I once cherished twist and curl in the inferno, finally turning to ash, just like all my lingering thoughts of him. Amidst the flying ashes, Zhou Yanji stepped into the hall. You haven't fully recovered. Why is the fire burning so fiercely? He frowned, his tone carrying its usual concern as his eyes swept over the brazier. I just feel cold. My voice was as light as a sigh as I turned towards the embroidery frame. Draped over the frame was a bright red wedding gown. According to custom, the bride had to personally complete the last few stitches to pray for a lifetime of happiness. I picked up the gold-threaded brocade my mother had left me, preparing to add the final touch of splendor to the gown. Zhou Yanji approached. Seeing the wedding gown, his expression seemed to soften. The wedding day is still some time away. Why be in such a hurry? The words wedding day were like a fine needle, stabbing my heart unexpectedly. A sharp pain shot through my fingertip, and a bead of crimson blood instantly blossomed into a glaring dark flower on the gown. What's some time away? In 10 days, I would be on the road to Nanja for the marriage alliance. Seeing this, Nanny Lu cried out and rushed over. Her trembling hand touched the blood stain, and tears streamed down her old face. Your Highness, a blood-stained wedding gown. It's a terrible omen. Her voice was choked and hoarse. The journey is so long and far. What are we to do? I threw my head back, biting my lip hard to force back the surging wave of bitterness in my eyes. To marry into a foreign land. To leave my home forever. It was a lie to say I wasn't afraid. Suppressing the lump in my throat, I tried to keep my voice steady as I comforted the sobbing Nanny Lu. Don't worry, Nanny. I am protected by the fortune of the imperial family. I will be safe and sound. For some reason, hearing her cries, a wetness also glistened in Zhou Yanji's eyes. He gazed at me, his voice low and solemn. Do not worry, Your Highness. I will immediately find the best seamstresses to rush a brand new wedding gown for you. I will ensure Your Highness has a splendid wedding. He seemed convinced that the edict was for our marriage. A complex emotion flashed in my eyes. My tone was cold. That won't be necessary. Zhou Yanji was silent for a moment. Then, in a tone that seemed to be trying to make amends, he said deeply, the last assassination attempt, I failed to protect Your Highness. It was my fault. Your Highness, please don't be angry anymore. I looked up and asked softly, so, you're not actually afraid that I might really die, are you? His expression froze as if stung by my words. he said urgently. Why would your highness say such a thing? How could I not be afraid? I swear I will never let your highness fall into such danger again. I asked again. Then what if one day I were to leave this place forever, leave you, and go somewhere you could never find me? Zhou Yanji's brow furrowed tightly, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He cut me off abruptly. Your highness, what?
What do you mean by that?
I slowly shook my head, swallowing all the words I had left unsaid. Never mind. After a brief silence, Zhou Yanji seemed to have collected his thoughts, his voice even lower. I will definitely marry your highness, and I will do my utmost to prevent the seventh princess's marriage alliance. It's just. He took a deep breath. If it cannot be helped and the seventh princess must marry into a foreign land, I hope your highness for the sake of sisterly affection will yield to her more and take care of her. The seventh princess, she has also been embroidering her wedding gown recently. She often thinks of the late empress and is quite melancholic. That bolt of gold-threaded brocade in your hands. Could you part with it for her? It was for her again. Every time, every approach, every word was about Zhang Lingyi. I was truly weary. Lord Zhou, Nanny Lu was trembling with anger, her voice sharp. Her highness is about to be married. Why must you keep pushing her like this? You go too far. I raised a hand to stop Nanny Lu, my voice calm and steady, as if discussing something that had nothing to do with me. I will have someone send it over. If you have no other business, Lord Zhou, please leave. Zhou Yanji gave me a long look, then finally bowed and turned to leave. The moment his figure disappeared beyond the doorway, a sharp bitterness rushed up my throat. I clenched my jaw, swallowing it all down. Nanny Lu patted my back sympathetically, her voice trembling. Your Highness, why don't you tell Lord Zhou that you are the one being sent for the marriage alliance? I slowly shook my head, my gaze drifting to the distant palace walls outside the window. I asked Father Emperor to keep it a secret. This way, I can see clearly just how many of Nanzhou's spies are hidden within this court. This small grievance of mine is nothing compared to the stability of the empire. However, before I could send someone with the gold-threaded brocade, Zhang Lingyi intercepted me in the imperial garden. She dismissed all the attendants around me, lifted her skirts, and rushed right up to me. Zhang Huyan, she shrieked, her hand gripping my wrist tightly. What on earth are you trying to do? Why do you keep pestering Zhou Yanji in private? I forcefully shook off her hand, my voice cold. What do you want to kill me? I took a step closer, staring at her instantly constricted pupils. But you should know if I die, that marriage sedan will be carried to your palace gates. My words hit their mark. The anger in Zhang Lingyi's eyes blazed hotter. Yes, I know. I know you're the one going to that barbaric land, she screeched. But you know perfectly well that Zhou Yanji is supposed to marry me. Why do you keep appearing before him like a lingering ghost? Her chest heaved violently, the Gariche beauty on her face completely gone, replaced by a crazed viciousness. You still haven't given up on him, have you?
Fine.
Very well. Then today I'll help you give up for good. Zhang Lingyi caught a glimpse of Zhou Yanji's sleeve, and with a cold smile, she pulled me into the lake with her. The startled cries of the maids on the shore were distorted and muffled by the water. I couldn't swim. Icy water flooded my nose and mouth, a feeling of suffocation gripping my throat like an iron clamp. I struggled desperately, but my limbs grew heavier and heavier. In the chaos, I saw Zhou Yanji. He dove into the water, but swam straight for Zhang Lingyi, watching him shield her as they slowly swam towards the shore. Despair completely submerged me, and my consciousness sank into endless darkness. After falling into the water, I developed a fever. Nightmares followed me like a shadow, dragging me back to my past life again and again. A piercing whistle tore through the air. In a flash, a powerful force pulled me into an embrace, shielding me heavily beneath it. Zhou Yanji. I struggled to sit up, still in shock, only to press my palm against a warm, sticky wetness on his chest. A sharp arrow had pierced his chest. Blood stained my fingertips, and it stained my entire world. Seeing his instantly pale face, Immense fear seized my heart, making it painful to breathe. My voice was broken, filled with a plea I had never made before. "Zhou Yanji, don't. I'm begging you, don't die." The scene shattered abruptly. I woke from the nightmare, my face cold and wet with tears. I curled up, hugging the cold fur blanket tightly, my suppressed sobs echoing in the silent bedchamber. Getting up, I took a brush, dipped it in ink, and wrote a letter to Zhou Yanji. As a child, my heart fluttered for you, a source of endless joy. I still remember you saying you wanted to be the mightiest general to protect me as the most honored princess. A young girl's heart was entirely devoted to you. You were the one who first caught my eye, and I was the one who clung to you. I knew long ago that your heart belonged to Lingy, and I should have let go. I was just greedy for that little bit of warmth you once gave me, unable to part with it. But I never knew that little bit of warmth would ultimately cost me my life. Reborn into this life, I no longer wish to, nor do I dare to love you again. After writing, I smiled, feeling a sense of release. I handed the letter to a trusted palace maid, instructing her to deliver it after I had left the palace. "Your Highness, you." The maid looked at the tear tracks on my face, her eyes full of worry. "It's nothing." I shook my head gently, my voice calm.
Go.
She had just left when Zhang Lingy and Zhou Yanji arrived together. Zhang Lingy hurried forward, finding concern as she reached out to check my temperature. I instinctively sidestepped, and she let out a cry, falling heavily to the ground. Lingy Zhou Yanji rushed forward, anxiously helping her up, his heartache plain to see. "Are you hurt?" Zhang Lingy nestled in his arms, her tear-streaked face upturned, her voice choked. "Sister, I know you dislike me, but we are sisters by blood. I'm about to be married, and I just wanted to spend some time with you before I leave." Zhou Yanji gently stroked her back, comforting her softly. Zhang Lingy's gaze fell on the hairpin in my hair, her voice suddenly sorrowful. "Sister, when I fell into the water that day before I lost consciousness, I thought I saw Mother's figure. It must have been Mother's spirit saving me." Her tears flowed freely as she pleaded. "Sister, I'm leaving soon. That hairpin Mother left you. Could you give it to me as a memento?" Zhou Yanji looked at her tear-stained face, immediately took out a silk handkerchief and wiped her tears with infinite tenderness. Then, he actually turned to me. "Your Highness, that was the only memento my mother left me, and he was helping her take it?" A towering wave of grief and anger rushed to my head. Trembling all over, I grabbed the teacup beside me and hurled it at him with all my might. "Get out!" The sharp scream tore through the hall. "Both of you get out!" The teacup hit him squarely on the forehead with a jarring crash. Blood instantly gushed out, trickling down from his brow bone, a shocking sight. He seemed burned by the hatred in my eyes and couldn't meet my gaze, only lowering his head in shame. His voice strained. "Your Highness, rest well." I slowly closed my eyes, letting the boundless desolation consume me completely. In our past life, he took an arrow from me. In this life, he abandoned me to die twice. Whether it was kindness or resentment, at this point we were even. In 2 days, the envoys from Nana would arrive. I calmly bid farewell to my old friends one by one, and distributed all the treasures in my storerooms to the palace staff who had served me diligently over the years. With that, there were no more attachments. On the day of the political marriage, I wore the magnificent heavy wedding gown and performed the final kowtow to my father emperor. Just as I stood up, about to step over the threshold of the great hall, a hand suddenly seized my wrist. My father emperor's voice trembled as it never had before, like a string pulled taut to its limit. "Huiyan, don't go. I won't let you go. I will risk this entire empire. Risk my own life, but I will protect you." I squeezed his hand, which was trembling violently with emotion, and forced my lips into the brightest smile I could manage. "Father Emperor, your daughter is a princess of the Qiu Jing dynasty. The affairs of the state must come first. How can I be willful? The auspicious hour has arrived." The eunuch's high-pitched voice severed the last thread of warmth. The sedan curtain fell, blocking out my father, Emperor's instantly aged face. The towering city gates were in sight. The Nanzhou envoy's procession was already waiting in formation. The sky, clear just moments ago, was now shedding a fine misty rain. The court officials followed behind, the atmosphere solemn and oppressive. Zhou Yanji was among them, his gaze involuntarily fixed on the glaringly red bridal sedan. A strange sense of dread seized his heart, his palms already aching from where his nails dug into them. He was mired in self-blame for failing to stop the seventh princess's marriage, but the ominous premonition in his heart grew like a wild vine, threatening to consume him. He looked around anxiously as if searching for an answer to his unease, but his gaze found no focus. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto a shadowy spot on the side of the city wall. Zhang Lingyi, she was standing right there, even waving at him. Ling. The blood in Zhou Yanji's veins seemed to freeze instantly, his pupils contracting violently.
She's here then.
Who? Who is in the bridal sedan? And bone-chilling cold shot up from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. At that exact moment, a fierce gust of wind laden with rain swept past. The red veil was violently lifted by the wind. Through the misty rain, Zhou Yanji finally saw the incredibly familiar face inside the sedan. Beneath the phoenix crown and embroidered cape, the one about to be married off to Nanzhou wasn't Zhang Lingyi. It was the fifth princess Zhang Huyan. Hu Yan's. His body went rigid, his feet unsteady, and he staggered before collapsing to the ground. Number impossible. This is absolutely impossible. How could it be? How could the one in the marriage alliance be Zhang Huyan?
He was.
He was already preparing for their wedding. He had even hired the most renowned seamstresses from the south at great expense. He had to stop this now, immediately. Zhou Yanji shot up from the ground and charged recklessly towards the glaring bridal sedan. He roared, "Stop, Huyan!" He snatched a horse from a nearby guard, practically throwing himself onto its back and whipping it fiercely. The horse, pained, let out a long neigh and bolted towards the procession. "Stop him!" The commander of the Imperial Guard bellowed like thunder. The well-trained guards instantly formed an iron wall, trapping Zhou, Yanji, horse, and all in the center. The leading general's face was like cold iron.
Lord Zhou, dismount at once.
The fifth princess is being married by imperial decree. The auspicious hour has begun, and no one is to disturb her. Zhou Yanji pulled the reins tight, the horse rearing up. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice distorted.
Get out of my way.
I want to see the fifth princess. Several guards built like mountains moved at once, clamping down on Zhou Yanji like iron vices. Their immense strength dragged him from the horse's back. His arms were brutally twisted behind him, and he was forced to his knees. "Let me go. Let go." His gaze was fixed on the bridal sedan, which was growing smaller and more distant. "Your Highness, Zhang Huyan, stop. I'm begging you, stop." His desperate cries were answered only by the silhouette of the sedan, shrinking as it was about to disappear through the city gate. Lord Zhou, the guard holding him, tightened his grip. This marriage was personally decreed by His Majesty. If you continue this nonsense and defy the edict, it is treason. Do not implicate us. Zhou Yanji snapped his head up, his eyes webbed with blood. What about the previous imperial edict for our marriage? His Majesty gave his word, betrothing the fifth princess, Zhang Huyan, to me. How can he go back on his word? The commander's face was ashen. He wasted no more words, shouting, "Take him away to the imperial prison to await trial." Zhou Yanji was dragged away roughly. He twisted his head desperately, his eyes fixed on the city gate where there was now nothing at all. "Stop." Zhang Lingyi rushed to the commander's side and whispered a few urgent words. The commander hesitated, weighed his options, and finally waved his hand, signaling them to release him. The restraints suddenly loosened. Zhou Yanji staggered, his body swaying. His face was pale as paper, his eyes so empty it was as if his soul had been ripped out. He stared blankly at the city gate. "Zhou Yanji." Zhang Lingyi ran to him, her voice sharp. Seeing no reaction, she raised her hand with all her might, her sharp nails digging into the flesh of his arm, nearly drawing blood. "Zhou Yanji, Snap out of it.
Look at me.
I am your fiancé. Decreed by the emperor, legitimate and proper. Zhang Huiyan is gone. She doesn't want you anymore. She practically roared, each word a whip, lashing at his heart. The sharp pain finally made Zhou Yanji's vacant eyes move, his gaze slowly focusing on Zhang Ling's face. What did you say? He snatched another horse and galloped back to his residence like a madman. Bursting into his study, he opened the edict with trembling hands. Beside the deep red imperial seal, a name clear as day burned itself into his eyes. Zhang Lingyi. On the marriage edict from beginning to end, the name written was Zhang Lingyi. So that's how it was. Then, all this time, what had he done to Zhang Huiyan? Zhou Yanji spat out a mouthful of blood. My lord. The steward's trembling voice came from the doorway. He held a letter. Someone from the 5th princess's palace just delivered this. Zhou Yanji spun around and snatched the letter. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely tear open the envelope. When he finally saw the familiar handwriting on the paper, boom. It was as if a bolt of lightning had exploded in his mind. He read it again and again. Impossible. Huiyan loved me so much. How could she not want me anymore? Reborn into this life. I no longer wish to, nor do I dare to love you again. He could no longer stand. He collapsed to the floor. Scalding tears streamed silently down his face, blurring everything before him. His mind was flooded with memories of the past. The proud little princess at 5, peeking at him from behind the empress, sticking her tongue out playfully. At 8, when she saw he was injured from martial arts practice, she clumsily bandaged him until he looked like an immobile rice dumpling, then wrinkled her nose and argued, "It's because you're too fat." The breathtaking moment at 15 when he caught her as she fell from the tree. She had wrapped her arms around his neck and said with a smile, "Zhou Yanji, I want to marry you. Then I won't be a princess anymore. I just want to be with you forever and ever."
Why? Because you can protect me.
Zhou Yanji, you have to protect me like this from now on. Otherwise, I won't want you anymore. And just as she said, she didn't want him anymore. Zhou Yanji looked up, choking back a sob, his eyes filled with helplessness. He was the one who couldn't see his own heart. A guttural cry of ultimate pain tore from his throat. His head began to throb violently, and fragmented images flashed before his eyes. The tall red candles burned brightly, casting a warm red glow throughout the bedchamber. The tedious Nanzhou ceremonies were finally over. The noise faded, leaving only the low murmur of the wind and snow outside the window. Heavy footsteps approached. The veil was lifted, and I looked up into a pair of deep hawk-like eyes. Helena's tall figure nearly blocked the candlelight. "5th princess, you have waited long." The tension in my heart eased slightly. I managed a gentle smile, meeting his gaze. "Your Majesty may call me by my name, Zhang Huiyan." He sat down as I suggested, his broad shoulder almost touching mine. The ceremonial wine cups in Nanzhou were rustic silver goblets. He picked one up and handed it to me, his movements slightly awkward. As our arms intertwined, and I drank the spicy yet warming wine, I could feel the tension in his arm muscles. After putting down the cup, he was silent for a moment, his hawk-like eyes on my face, as if choosing his words carefully. "I know," he began again, his voice lower and huskier than before, carrying an almost clumsy consideration. "You delicate people from the Central Plains are not used to the climate here. The wind is harsh, the snow is cold, and the food is coarse." He paused as if gathering his resolve before continuing. "But whatever you want, tell me. I'll get it all for you." He said the last few words quickly, as if unaccustomed to such direct courting. The contrast with his decisive, ruthless image on the battlefield was so great that a warmth spread through me. I couldn't help but reach out and gently wrap my arms around his strong waist. "Your Majesty's kindness. Huiyan understands." I leaned against his shoulder, my voice soft. "Rest assured, I will learn to love this land and its people just as you do. This is my duty as a princess in a marriage alliance, and it is also my wish to share your burdens." I could feel his body tense slightly, then slowly relax. A large, calloused hand with well-defined knuckles carefully covered the back of my hand on his waist, the movement tentative and gentle. He said no more, only pulling me tighter into his embrace. The red candles crackled. Outside, the snowstorm raged on, but inside there was only the sound of 2 breaths and heartbeats gradually merging into one. Helena's promise, "Whatever you want, tell me, I'll get it all for you," was not an empty, impulsive remark. He had heard from somewhere that noble ladies from the Central Plains couldn't do without delicate hand-warmers in winter. And so, a couple of days later on my desk appeared a massive hand-warmer made of brass, almost the size of a small brayer. The charcoal inside burned fiercely, radiating heat. The maids couldn't help but giggle, and even the usually stern old palace matron's lips twitched. Helene himself, however, was oblivious, looking at me with an expression that seemed to be asking for praise. "This one is warm enough. The craftsmen of Nanja worked through the night to make it. It's much more effective than those little trinkets from the Central Plains." I looked at the warmer, which required 2 maids to lift, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but my heart was filled with warmth. I took his hand, my fingertips brushing over a small red mark, likely from supervising the work. "Your Majesty has been most thoughtful." "It is very warm, and Huan likes it very much," I said softly. The tips of his ears turned slightly red. "As long as you like it," he said gruffly. I too did not stand still. I became even more dedicated to learning the Nanja language. From my initial stumbling, I could now converse fluently with the maids and palace staff, and even understand parts of the court discussions. I began to try expressing simple concerns to Helen in his language. "Your Majesty, the wind and snow are heavy today. Please have a bowl of hot soup when you return from court." Every time he heard this, a light would flash in his eyes. Though he would only grunt in acknowledgement, he would drink the soup much faster. And Helion Yas' way of showing happiness was even more direct. He sent men on fast horses to travel 1,000 miles to a border town of the Jing dynasty to buy what was said to be the most authentic Central Plains pastries. When the exquisite food box was presented to me, the pastries inside had long been crumbled by the bumpy, cold journey. The frosting and filling were mixed together in a pitiful mess. Helene stared at the box of pastry mush, his thick brows furrowed, his hawk eyes filled with frustration and displeasure as if he had just lost a battle, but I couldn't bear to disappoint him. I scooped up a little with a small silver spoon and tasted it, my eyes curving into crescent. "Your Majesty, though the pastries have lost their shape, their taste remains. It is the taste of home. I am very happy." He stared at me for a long moment, and only after confirming I wasn't just comforting him did he huff. "Next time, I'll make them run faster." Later, by some means, he actually managed to have the pastries delivered in a relatively intact state, watching my satisfied expression as I took small bites. A pleased curve finally appeared on his stern lips. By the time Zhou Yinji arrived in Nanzhou, I had already spent my first New Year here. The side palace was empty and slightly chilly. Zhou Yinji stood with his back to me, his silhouette as desolate as a withered tree in late autumn. Hearing footsteps, he spun around. In just a few months, he had become gaunt and skeletal. The dark circles under his eyes were heavy, the former grace of the young lord completely gone. He looked like a string stretched to its breaking point. "Huiyin," he rushed forward, his voice, his eyes filled with drowning regret and a near-death plea. "I've finally found you." I stopped a few steps away, nodding distantly. "Lord Zhou." He looked as if he'd been struck, his face pale as he argued desperately. "Don't call me that. It's me. I remember everything. I was blind. I failed you. I was the one who pushed you into that marriage sedan. You are my wife. 20 years of marriage. It shouldn't be like this.
Come with me."
"I'll risk my life too." "Zhou Yinji." I cut off his confession. "Your wife is Zhang Lingyi. The imperial edict is clear. As for me, I have already granted you your wish with my departure. Now my life is in Nanzhou." "No, that was a mistake," he cried, his eyes bloodshot. "I was blind to my own heart. I wouldn't admit I loved you. Huan, come back with me. We can start over." Zhou Yanji, I interrupted him again, each word clear. I don't love you anymore. Tears welled in his eyes. Huiyan, I deserve to die 1,000 deaths.
Please give me a chance to atone.
Enough. Zhou Yanji, let it go. I looked at him. Wallowing in regret is meaningless. In Nanzhou, I have found my path. I love the vastness of these grasslands, the smiles the people show me. All I seek in this life is for the people of Jing and Nanzhou to suffer less from the chaos of war. This is my path, my choice. You go back and live your life. There's no need for any more regrets. My regret is you, he roared. It's watching you leave me. It's not holding on to you, Huiyan.
Give me one more chance.
Just one. He choked on his words, tears shattering in his eyes. Only when he was exhausted did I speak slowly. Zhou Yanji, you say you remember everything. Then do you know in our past life we had a child? He froze, his pupils trembling as he stared at me blankly. I watched the blood drain from his face. It was you who imprisoned me in the villa after Zhang Lingyi's death. It was you who allowed your subordinates to humiliate me, and it was you who personally ended its life. It was gone without a sound, and I could never bear children again. There is the life of a small child between us. I think he would not want to see us entangled again either. A child. A broken sound escaped his throat. He staggered back against a pillar, his body sliding down the cold surface to curl up on the floor. He clutched his head. A suppressed, animalistic whimper forced from the depths of his throat. I gave him one last look.
Take care.
With those two soft words, I turned without any lingering attachment and walked resolutely out of the side palace. Helenu was already standing in the twilight of the corridor, a dusting of snow on his shoulders, his gaze locked on me. I walked to him and brushed the frost from his shoulders. He took my cold fingers in his warm, large hand, holding them tight. Is it settled? He asked in a low voice. Yes. I leaned against him. It's all in the past, he said. No more, only gripping my hand tighter. Then untied his thick cloak and wrapped it around me without argument. The snow is heavy. Let's go back to the palace. After that night, Zhou Yanji never appeared in Nanzhou again. Scattered news came later, saying he had fallen gravely ill. After recovering, he became silent and withdrawn, dedicating himself entirely to military and political affairs. He and Zhang Lingyi treated each other with a respect as cold as ice, and he never took another concubine in his life. The nights in Nanzhou were still cold, the wind and snow still fierce. But my heart had taken deep root in this land. Many years later, on a similar snowy day, I closed my eyes for the last time in Helena's warm palm, passing away peacefully. This life began with a mistaken marriage, but ended in fulfillment. The name of the Jing dynasty princess ultimately became a symbol of peace for Nanzhou. A fate of sacrifice blossomed into a meaning that transcended a mere political marriage. I had granted Zhou Yanji his fulfillment, and I had also forged my own path home with no regrets. The snowstorm had not ceased, but the promise of spring was on the horizon.